Video games are a fairly new and popular form of entertainment, and for many are a way of distracting themselves from the stresses and problems of everyday life. In October 1958, physician William Higginbotham created what is thought to be the first video game. It was a very simple tennis game, similar to the classic 1970s video game Pong. Since the 1980s, video gaming has become a very popular form of entertainment and part of the modern popular culture in most parts of the world. One of the early games was Space War, which is developed by computer scientists and is one of the most important and influential games in video game history. And the game Asteroids was later developed in 1979, and this was in the golden age of arcade video games, which was between 1978 to 1982. In this period, it was apparent that there was a demand for video games, which led them to be commercialised. The video game industry is booming. The US video game industry revenue is expected to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 3.6% from 2015 to 2020. A new report by PwC expects that the global video game industry is expected to grow even faster, 73.3 billion in 2015 to 90.1 billion in 2020. One of the reasons that gaming is thriving is that there's so many segments to it. It is diversified due to the multiple platforms of PC, console, and mobile gaming. Leading on from this, video games as an industry are doing very well with the advancement in mobile technology, allowing people of all ages, as long as they have access to a smartphone, to play mobile games. These games are called social and casual games. This has resulted in people of all ages playing games such as Candy Crush Saga and Game of War at any time, as they are not restricted to being in a home setting. As the phenomena of video games develops, they are getting increasingly more violent. This has brought about theories of whether video games create aggression and could eventually lead to transgressive acts. A big argument is that a big demographic of video games are children who are not legally old enough to play these games, most famously Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto 5. A lot of children play Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto 5, which is certified 18, and many scientists place emphasis on the fact that this could damage their mental state. Grand Theft Auto was released in 2013, and by March 2016 it had sold 63 million copies, as stated by Take-Two. First day sales for games was over 3.6 million, equivalent to 310 million. In its first week, Grand Theft Auto 5 sold over 6 million units globally, generating income of approximately 500 million. However, when Grand Theft Auto was released, there was a particular mission which sparked a lot of controversy from viewers and commentators for its depiction of torture. One of the protagonists, Trevor Phillips, is tasked to interrogate a man using torture equipment such as electricity and pliers on the restrained man. The mission leaves player very little to the imagination.
I just had them lasered! Are they still alive? Come on! Hold on!
Video games with an 18 classification are known for their violence. Call of Duty allows players to take on a role of a bloodthirsty soldier in a number of violent scenarios, arm themselves with an arsenal of weapons including rifles, pistols and grenades. The game has been ridden in controversy, with Norwegian mass killer Anders Breivik claiming he had trained himself to kill 77 victims through playing the game. Dr. Applebaum said, "We know there are numerous risk factors for aggressive behaviour. What researchers need to do is conduct studies that look into the effects of video game play and people's risk for aggression or violence due to a combination of risk factors." However, study results have been conflicting. Early in 2014, a study of 3,000 children by researchers at Iowa State University found frequent exposure to violent video games did seem to boost the likelihood of aggression behaviour in children and teens, while another 2014 found, this time in Stenson University in Florida, that between 1996 and 2011, rates of violence amongst young people fell in the United States, even as video games became progressively more violent over time. Worries about a connection between video game use and violence spiked in 2012 after Adam Lanza shot and killed 20 children and 6 teachers at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut. Lanza was obsessed with video games, and following the massacre, a lot of Congress called for restrictions on them.
By state police there in Connecticut that 2 shooters were initially believed involved in the mass shooting. One of those shooters now dead. What's not been confirmed is whether or not that gunman took his own life or whether or not there was something that ensued after authorities began arriving at the scene. And now the big question will be, is there in fact that second shooter, and where is that second shooter? There have been...
After the Sandy Hook shooting, the media focused on video games as an explanation to why it happened, but the widespread condemnation of video games could be an example of a moral panic. It had been revealed that the shooter played many games, including Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto. However, Chris Ferguson writes that nowhere in the official investigation report are video games linked to the shooting, and also highlights that it does not mention anywhere that Lanza used games as training system for the shooting. Overall, Ferguson sums up the media representation with this quote: The condemnation of violent video games following this Newton shooting is a classic example of a moral panic. He also places emphasis on the fact that during the past 20 years in which video games have soared in popularity, youth violence has dropped by almost 90%. Many critics of video game aggression point to the theory of catharticism, which suggests that by playing video games the user is releasing themselves from doing the urge in real life by simulating it. The producers of violent video games, like the producers of violent films, claim that their products are cathartic. Dr. Bartha claims that aggressive urges and impulses can be purged by playing violent video games. However, Carol Travis concluded that the cathartic hypothesis has virtually never been supported by research. In 2001, Anderson and Bushman published a meta-analysis, and their analysis concluded that exposure to violent video games has a negative impact on a variety of measures. They found that playing video games causes an increase in aggressive behaviour. On this basis, the authors assert that video games pose a threat to public health. However, there's an issue with aggressive studies. It is very difficult to study aggression, as only experimental research can provide a definite answer to the question whether violent video games cause aggression. Yet, as with many issues of public concern, it is impossible to conduct the perfect experiment. The issue is that aggression tends to be poorly defined and in a way doesn't map on real-world violence. Some researchers, such as Anderson and Dill, suggest that the participatory nature of violent video games may have greater influence on players than violent television, whereas others, such as Pinker, suggest that any link between video games and aggression is best explained by third variables, such as environment or innate aggression. Ultimately, there's no single factor that can drive someone toward violence or aggression, but that violent video games could be classified as one risk, and the APA are calling upon the gaming industry to increase parental controls over violent games to stop this aggression. From the evidence I have given, there is a clear correlation between violent video games and aggression. However, it cannot be said with confidence that violent video games cause people to do transgressive acts. The media clings onto the idea that and points towards violent video games as a scapegoat to suggest why individuals commit transgressive acts such as school shootings. However, there is no evidence to suggest a causal relationship, and it can only be said that vulnerable individuals may have a higher risk of committing transgressive acts if they play these violent games.